Well, welcome everyone to the Ag Culture Podcast. Today I have joining with me Dr. Michelle Schack, who is a dairy veterinarian and co-founder of Dairy Kind. Michelle, thanks so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
Looking forward to our conversation. Now, you sit at kind of a rare intersection. You're in the barn pretty much every day as a practicing vet, but you also train teams on animal welfare and human welfare, and you reach hundreds of thousands of consumers through your online presence as well at, is it Dairy Doc?
At Dairy Doc, that's right.
Dairy Doc, yeah. So quite a diversity of conversation that we're going to have today. So I'm looking forward to diving right in. But first, I think it's worth mentioning your upbringing and your background. I mean, you came like every other vet that is out there, living just outside Silicon Valley, right?
That's right. I did. I grew up in California, not near agriculture at all in my town. There's lots of great ag in California, but it wasn't near where I was. And I joined 4-H and because I loved animals and I wanted to do more with animals, and everybody was quilting and doing scrapbooking, and there were no animals. I said, "Where's the animals?" And we didn't have FFA. We didn't have these programs for kids that I see now and are just amazing opportunities. So I didn't even know what I was missing, though, because I didn't come from an agriculture family at all. I worked a lot with dogs and I got lots of experience as much as I could. And it wasn't until I went to UC Davis that I started working with livestock. And that's where I really found my passion.
Oh, that's interesting. And what made you in particularly interested in dairy cattle?
Well, I took a lot of courses working with lots of different livestock in undergrad because I was an animal science major and that was part of my college studies. There are a lot of really great opportunities for hands-on learning, and I was just trying to do everything animal related I could. So I worked with sheep, I worked with goats, I worked with beef cattle, actually with Dr. Frank Mittlerner at the Clear Center, working on the emissions of animal agriculture, and we were doing a lot of projects with beef at the time. So that was a really great experience. I was the herd manager at the swine facility my last 2 years of undergrad. And so I have a little soft spot in my heart for pigs. But dairy cattle really was what I kept coming back to. I tried other things as well outside of livestock, thinking what else is there, and loved all of my experiences, but I just kept coming back to dairy cattle. But when I went to Davis to vet school, I wasn't 100% sure I wanted to work with dairy. I knew I wanted to do something with production animal medicine, but it wasn't until my clinical year at UC Davis that I decided on dairy. And that was because that was when I started to get to see the behind the scenes part of being a dairy cattle veterinarian and seeing all the things that they do that you don't realize when you just look at the surface. As an undergrad student, I saw a lot of preg checking cows, a lot of emergencies, and that was really cool. But the data analysis that veterinarians get to do and the relationship building and the training and employee development on farms, those things are invaluable. And I love that part of my job. It's like you get to do the animals and work with the animals and do all the really cool veterinary things, but then you also get to work with the people and develop those relationships. I'm on farms once a week or every other week. And so I really get to know the people, and I feel like I can make a bigger impact from that sense as well.
That's great insight. Now, I want to first start out talking about kind of a unique perspective, I would say, that you have versus a lot of other people that talk about animal welfare. And that is really looking at, how do you improve cow care and cow comfort? And you really believe it starts with human well-being, correct?
I do. That is very true. And that's something that has developed throughout my career working with the farmers and then the employees on the farm, because we have a lot of different animal welfare standards. The herds that I work with, they have to go through 4, 5, 6, 7 audits a year looking at animal welfare. I mean, we have so much scrutiny on the animals, and by all means, that's good. We should have accountability and we should have verification that proper animal welfare, animal well-being is being upheld on these farms. But what I realized as a veterinarian trying to help them meet those standards was that it really comes down to the individual person that's caring for those animals. The farmer that owns the animals is not the one doing every job every day on a lot of large farms. That may be true if you have 3 cows, but once you get even past 50 cows, usually you have at least one helper, and somebody is helping you do these things on the farm. Somebody's helping you feed, somebody's helping you milk, somebody's helping you trim feet. I mean, every job on the farm, even down to just cleaning the corrals, impacts animal well being. And a lot of the employees don't fully understand or appreciate the impact that they have. And they should. I want them to. I really enjoy working with the people on farms whose job it is to care for the animals every day and help them see what their expectations are, but then also what kind of impact they can have.
Yeah, and it's not just dairy either, like you mentioned. I think I mean any animal agriculture activity really boils down to that human interaction.
That's very true, and that's even to growing crops on fields and to other livestock as well, because the people have to understand it can get a lot of these jobs in agriculture can get really monotonous. They're labor intensive jobs and often very repetitive, and they're difficult. They're not easy jobs, and it can feel we can quickly jump to they should be doing this right, or how come they didn't do this, or how come this got skipped over today. But we have to appreciate that these are challenging jobs we're asking them to do, and they don't always even really understand what the impact is if you do skip something or you rush through it or something like that. And it's so important for the animals, but then also for the products that are coming from those farms and where they're going to. And I think that that's really where it starts. Animal welfare really does come through the people.
So when you walk onto a dairy, what are signs that you tell that people are struggling, and how quickly does that translate into the animal outcomes?
I started working with dairy cattle in California many, many years ago. And I worked with them throughout my undergrad and then throughout college and on externships. And now I've been a vet for 10 years. And now I'm in Arizona. And I've seen a lot of different farms in that time. And it's interesting because when you get someone that is rushing the cows or being very loud or very frantic with their movements or doesn't have these low stress animal handling skills, the cows will tell you very quickly. Mm-hmm. Those types of herds, the cows are jumpy. They aren't moving in a predictable fashion. They're balking where they shouldn't be balking. They're more kicky. It's not a safe situation to be around cows that are stressed.
Right.
And it is in everyone's best interest, which again comes back to, we talked about the human welfare impacts animal welfare, but that then in turn impacts the human welfare again. It's a circular thing. When we take care of the cows will take care of us. Yep. And we all need to work together on the farm, animals and people and owners and consultants alike. So it's very interesting because you can tell very quickly when things are getting out of hand. And I also want to mention that I think when we talk about animal welfare, we get very hyper focused on preventing abuse. Like, we're not going to beat the cows or stab the cows. And yes, we should not be doing those things, but I don't see that in my job. So it's really kind of a cool place that we've gotten to in the industry because we're now fine-tuning it. People are not abusing their animals on farm, and they're not condoning abuse in any way. We are really just looking at how can we improve the well-being of these animals from an overall standpoint. We're talking about cow comfort here, not just not abusing cows. And that's a really cool place to be. And there's a lot of small signs that you can look for, but they're really subtle signs.
Yeah, and cows are very, very perceptive. A lot of people don't understand that. And I worked with a vet for quite a few years at a large dairy that I was a part of. And one thing he mentioned one time, this was during COVID, when milk prices were really bad, and for a couple of months there, and things were just, everyone was anxious. All the employees were anxious. The owners were anxious. And he said, the cows sense the anxiety of the people, and he, coming on once a week, could see the change in anxiety level of the herd because of the people. Because the people were anxious, not, like you said, not because anyone was abusing animals, just because there was that heightened sense of anxiety across everyone, and the cows felt it. They're very, very perceptive to that.
That's a good point. And I've seen that with management change as well. It having nothing to do with the cows, but a manager that is yelling at the people all the time, or people are scared of that manager. And then you change that to a manager who's working with the people, who's supporting them, lifting them up, helping them know what their expectations are. And all of a sudden, the whole culture of the farm calms down, and the cows will calm down as well. And it's really quite amazing, because cows have a flight zone. They're not, this is something that I talk about a lot. They're not meant to be hugged and cuddled. That's not natural for them. You can train them to do that, but that's not natural behavior. But in the same way, it's also not natural for them to be so scared they're running away and slipping and falling and kicking. And cows generally, especially our dairy cattle on dairy farms in the US today, we have bred them to be docile, and they are generally pretty calm.
Right.
And I do think that they really pick up, and the culture of a farm really starts in the top. It starts in ownership, but then goes down to management, and then goes down to the individual employee, which then goes down to the cows. And that trickle down effect is real.
Yep. Now, what do you think is the most overlooked source of stress or burnout for dairy workers that maybe the farm owners or managers don't always recognize that you've seen?
That's a good question, because I could name a lot of different things. I think that the hours are stressful, and the work is stressful. I think not everybody is meant to do this job, and it can be really challenging, and it's just not for everyone. But that being said, of the people that are working on farms and want to be working on a dairy farm, generally it's support and the culture of the farm in general. What kind of support are they receiving from their management? And does the management and ownership believe in them? Do they take the time to learn their names? Do they take the time to train them adequately? Or are they just thrown into a job expected to know what to do? Or confusion on what are their expectations at all? Maybe they say, yeah, I know how to milk cows. And so management or ownership says, okay, get in there and milk the cows. But the way they did it on their previous farm is totally different than the way they did it on this farm. And they thought they were doing a good job, but they're not. But it's the lack of training and lack of support that can be very frustrating for people on farms.
Now, you mentioned a little bit of it already, but if you were designing an ideal work environment for animal well-being and human well-being, what are 2 or 3 things that you would build into that culture in order to make it thrive?
First would be a solid onboarding training. And we all know an employee, when they get hired, have to do their HR paperwork and do all of that. So let's take that time to also set clear expectations of how the animals are to be treated and what the culture of this farm is. That onboarding training, I think, is so crucial. And I hear some people will say, well, we don't know if they're going to stick around, so we're not going to train them just yet. But I think that that's a vicious cycle, right?
Self-fulfilling prophecy, right?
Yes, exactly. If we don't put the time into them, why would they put the time to stay with us? So that onboarding training day one is critical. I really do believe that. Even if people roll their eyes and say, I already know this stuff, well, we're now reinforcing that it's important on this farm and it should be important to you too. So that I would say. And then an open policy where people can report issues and then those issues actually get corrected, or hey, I need some type of new equipment, maybe this and this broke and so we need a new one, and then the new one comes. They feel like they are allowed to voice their concerns or their ideas. Maybe they say, hey, you know what, actually, if we did this in a different order, or I had this thing at my old farm and I think it would be really helpful to us, and they can voice their ideas and they feel heard. That's important. And that's just step one to then having them feel like they can be heard if there is a real big issue, because being able to report any animal abuse is very important. And then seeing that those reports are acted on really goes a long way to showing the individual employee that the management and ownership of that farm really does care about the animals. And I've seen that time and time again, where the employees, they really, really, really care about the animals. They want to do what's right, but perhaps they don't have the right equipment, or they feel rushed, or they think that nobody cares, or nobody's watching, or something like that. And it's discouraging to them. And so those farms that have that real open policy is very, very important to improving animal well-being.
All right. Now let's dive a little bit more into the first aspect that you were talking about, training. So in your mind, what should the first 72 hours look like? I know you mentioned the first 24 hours are critical, but what's that on a dairy farm or a livestock operation? What should that first 72 hours look like for a new employee in your mind?
I definitely think it should start with some blanket foundational training. So my partners and I started Dairy Kind to help fill this need in the industry. It's a video-based online training platform where employees can get the education they need to set those basic foundational expectations. Cows are to be cared for. If there's any concerns, report it to a supervisor immediately. There's zero tolerance for animal abuse. This is what the different jobs are and why they're important. You know, this is when you're milking a cow, you are doing these things, but it's also important because it impacts us in this way. And that impacts you in your daily job, but then also impacts the milk quality and the production on this farm. So those types of foundational trainings are very important, and a standardized one. So you know that what you got told is exactly the same thing that the other guy got told, which is exactly the same thing as what she got told. And so we're all on the same page here that the animals should be well cared for, and the farm values the employees and the animals. So setting that stage is very important. But then building on that, I think we need the on-the-job training, which this is what a lot of farms already do. And many farms do a great job of this. They don't always do a good job writing it down, but that on-the-job training, protocol-specific training is important. So perhaps there's a lead milker or a supervisor in the maternity, or a calf feeder that is really, really good at training. And so this person is put in charge to help the new person understand as they're going through their day what their expectations are. We should be feeding the calves this much at this time, and this is how we clean the bottles. Here's where things are stored and kept, and here's where your equipment is. That type of thing needs to be that on-the-job training. And then this doesn't necessarily have to happen in the first 72 hours, but I find that it is received very positively to then be followed up with a type of classroom training, bringing in a consultant, or even some type of meeting with a manager or a supervisor. Whether you have regular meetings on your farm within your team, or you bring in a veterinarian or a trainer, an outside consultant, and and have the employees be able to ask questions, give ideas, understand more about something perhaps they were confused about. I just did a training recently for some breeders, and I brought uteruses. So they were able to actually hold the uteruses in their hand. And even though they knew how to breed cows because they've been breeding cows, this was a great opportunity for them to really visualize, what have I been touching in there? And this is what it looks like. And okay, so then we practice with the pipettes, and that's really important as a follow-up. So you're already doing the job and now you follow up with this. It's kind of a check-in with them. How are you doing? Do you have any questions? So I think that training needs to be a multimodal approach. Let's fix that. I think that we need a multimodal approach to training on all farms, because also everybody learns differently. So maybe one thing impacts you, Paul, in one way. You say, wow, I really got a lot out of that video, because I was able to see all the angles and I was able to really understand it, and they explained it so clearly. And then somebody else over here says, wow, being able to touch and feel it was really powerful to me, and now I understand it. So you're able to catch all the people on the farm because everybody's learning different ways, and not leave someone out, and get your message across. So I think that training is very important. And while it starts in the first 72 hours, it also needs to continue ongoing. There's things that we need to check in, and annual retrainings are important as well.
Yeah, and along with that, there's a lot of documentation that probably should occur. And I know I'm probably guilty of this, being a farmer. Documentation kind of sounds like a 4-letter word sometimes.
So true.
It's the last thing I want to do. But why is it important?
It's important for a lot of reasons. One being risk management. If there is ever any accusations, you want to be able to bring out and have very clear documentation of what was said and when it was said and who was there when it got said, so that it doesn't become this he said, she said situation. It becomes, hey, you accuse me of this, but I have clear documentation that actually this is what happened. So that from that risk management, risk mitigation standpoint, it's very important. But also brand protection. The public doesn't fully understand where their food comes from, and not understanding something can be scary. I don't really know how my computer is built, and I'm not even going to try to fix it, right? So not everybody is an expert in everything, and there's a lot of questions around dairy farming, around a lot of different parts of agriculture. And so in order to protect your brand and build up your brand, you can be able to show people, hey, these are our values and we are conveying them to our employees in these ways. And here's the documentation of that. So that's really important. And then I guess most simply is many farms in many aspects of agriculture are having to go through audits and evaluations, and those require the documentation. I mean, looking at the dairy side, when you look at the last program cycle of the farm program, they issue mandatory corrective action plans if there's a non-compliance in your evaluation. And 3 of the top 5 across all the farms in the United States, 3 of the top 5 reasons people got written up was for training. Because we may be doing a good job, but we're not writing it down. So we need to write it down because it will make your life easier from that standpoint as well. But the only reason all of that exists is for the first 2 reasons. That brand protection and risk mitigation is why these evaluations and audits look at those things.
Yeah. No, as a farmer, I get frustrated sometimes and think, well, I do these certification programs and it's still in a paper and a binder in my office. Like, why can't we get to the 21st century on some of this stuff? And are there tools that you've seen to help us do that and streamline some of this a little more?
Yeah. And I think that's really important. And it's a good comment because it's very true. That's just a very common story that I hear very often. And that's why we started Dairy Kind. The team I have, there's 7 veterinarians, and we are all practicing herd veterinarians on dairy farms every day. And we saw that need. It's just so challenging to keep up with that level of documentation. And then even if you do, so you have a binder that you completed calf care training on this date and time, and here's some signatures. Can you read the signatures? Maybe. Good thing you have a binder.
Say that.
yes. So at least you have a binder, because not everyone even has that. So that's a good start. But then what happened in that calf care training? Did you tell people how many times a day they're to offer feed to those calves? Did you tell people how to move the calves? Did you tell people how to use the trailer or wheelbarrow or whatever you're using to move calves? Did you talk about nipples that are too widely cut and open and make sure? I mean, maybe you did cover all of those things, but all it says is calf care training, right? And so having some documentation, and very thorough documentation, I think is really, really important, especially for that step 1 foundational training and then the annual retraining thereafter. Those things are important. And that's why we designed Dairy Kind the way we did, because we thought we're trying to help farmers be more efficient and effective with their training and change the culture on farms, that this training is important. It's not just something we're going to scramble to do the day before the audit, or forget when was the last time we did the training. Has it been a year? I don't know. So let's just go ahead and do it. No, let's know exactly who got trained and when, and what trainings they're due for, and then make sure they get done on time. And it's so challenging to do that on your own. So having a tool like Dairy Kind or another tool is very important to your documentation of training on farms.
Oh, that's great advice. Now, I want to pivot here, the last little bit of time we have together, toward your meteoric rise in social media, right? You're very, very well known across social media platforms. You're speaking all over the place. Tell us a little bit about those communication channels, and you're one of the most visible vets online. What's that like, and how did that come about?
Well, I was really proud of what we were doing with Dairy Kind. And so I started a social media to talk about Dairy Kind and to offer some education for the company. And then I was just having so much fun with it. So I decided that I wanted to move to other channels. And I got a Gen Z intern to help me set up a TikTok handle. And I didn't know what I was doing, but she made me a profile, and I thought, I'm just going to post a video about how cows are milked on a dairy farm. And I showed the process, showed the cows walking in. I showed the dipping, stripping, wiping. I showed milking the cow. I showed them walking out. And it was just so simple. It was something that I did in a quick snippet on the farm as I was cleaning my boots. And I was really excited about it because, again, I didn't grow up around any kind of agriculture, and I would have loved to have watched that as a kid. And social media nowadays is so huge, and a lot of people receive a lot of their information through social media and learn fun new facts all the time on social media. So I thought, well, why can't I do that? So I posted this video thinking this will be kind of fun, maybe reach a few people. I had 0 followers at the time. It got 78,000 views.
On your first video?
My first video. I had 0 friends. And I thought,
that's amazing.
Yeah. I was like, wow, this is a real thing.
This is really easy, right?
I have to keep doing this. And so I played with it a little bit over the next few weeks, posting some different things to figure out what people wanted from me, because that's how it is with social media. You just have to try different things, and the people will tell you what they want to hear from you. And the people told me they wanted to learn. And I thought that was just amazing. I think I really commend people for being open-minded and wanting to learn, even if they've never had the opportunity to learn. And I think that I'm able to connect with them in a way because I also came from that background. I understand why they're confused and scared and concerned about where their milk comes from. And I want to be an open book and be very transparent. there are no secrets. They should know all the things about where their milk comes from. I think that that's really great. So I've had a lot of fun with it. I now have across Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, I have about 500,000 followers, and I just post fun facts about dairy farming. I had a farmer tell me the other day that he doesn't watch my videos because they feel boring to him because they're like really basic. And I said, that's okay. You're not my intended audience for these channels. I want to just answer people's questions. And sometimes I get asked really basic questions like, where does the milk come from? Or are we drinking cow pee? People are genuinely confused about anatomy. Do only girl cows make milk? Yes, only girl cows make milk. And I go through it, but I try to stay respectful, and it's just been a lot of fun.
Now, how do you deal with the consumers that might attack you, or how do you not feel like attacking a consumer that just really seems off the wall?
Well, I just remind myself that I'm not going to change that person's mind. If they're so off the wall, they've already made up their mind and they're being really aggressive about it, I'm not going to change their mind. And that's okay. People can have their different ethical opinions. And if it comes from an ethical standpoint, like there's some people out there that genuinely believe nobody should have pets and no animals should be domesticated. I can't argue with that. That's your opinion. It's different than mine, but I'm not going to convince you otherwise. But a lot of where the negativity comes from in terms of dairy and animal agriculture in general is people like that genuinely believe that any kind of farming is wrong, then extrapolating it out to weird specifics on the farm. And so when I see those, I do respond to them, and I respond to them not for that person, but for everyone else I'm speaking to, because there's somebody else out there that read that person's comment that thought, oh, that's kind of a good point. Why do we cut the horns off of cows? Doesn't that hurt? That I never really thought about that. And so I respond to those people and explain it so that everyone else following along and watching and listening can hear the truth. And then they can make up their own minds about it. If they still believe that this is not something they want to support, that's their choice and their decision. But I want them to make those decisions from an informed standpoint with all of the facts so that they can make their own decisions and not just listen to what someone says online.
Yeah, well, that's great insight. What's been the toughest or most memorable interaction that you've had on social media so far, and what did you learn from that?
I had a person that commented on one of my TikTok videos and said, how can you support an industry like this? You're a horrible person. The first thing I did is I didn't correct their use of your, that they used the wrong your. And I just want to say that out loud because I was very proud of myself. And I encourage other people not to get very nitpicky on spelling and grammar because that's not what the issue is about. And though it may make you feel better for a second, that's not helping the situation. So I left that alone. And I responded with what my job is as a veterinarian. My job is to be an advocate for the animals. My job is to help the animals live a good life. And if I offer healthcare, veterinary services to these animals, I am helping them live a better life. And if the farmer that owns these animals doesn't have healthcare or veterinary care for his or her animals, then they're not going to live as good of a life. Because if they get sick, there'll be no one around to help them or someone untrained to help them. And so I explained that. And very interestingly, this person then sent me a direct message and started asking about specifics on farms. Does milking hurt the cow? Well, and I will say it was less of a question and more of a pointed, yes, but how do you support them when milking is so painful? And so I was able to answer that as a question. Let's talk about how milking is not painful and should not be painful. And then about dehorning, and then about access to pasture. And it went on, and we had a very long conversation. And at the end of it, they said, I respectfully disagree with everything that you're saying. And I said, well, great. But they said, thank you for taking the time to explain these things to me, because nobody's ever taken the time to explain. And I think some people can sound so accusatory and so inflammatory online, but then no one takes them seriously, except maybe other people who are already on their side. And I think these healthy debates are really good for the world. You may not change everybody's minds, but other people will see it and understand those interactions and be able to form their own opinions. And this person may think twice about some of the things that they've heard, or at least stop spreading misinformation because now they've been told what the truth is. So those types of interactions, even though I didn't change this person's mind, it made me happy. I felt like I did some good today, because this is the type of thing that the world needs, is more connection between agriculture and people outside of agriculture, or people auxiliary to agriculture, retailers and CPG brands. They don't always even understand where the milk comes from for their products. So I think that building those connections are really, really important. And the social media and my speaking are ways that I feel that I can help the world in that way.
Yeah. So outside of social media, you just mentioned speaking. What's different when you're communicating on social media versus communicating through speaking?
Well, I started out on social media because I just wanted to share some of the little tidbits, things that I get asked all the time. I thought, all right, I can post about these things. And it was a lot of fun. And then I started getting asked to speak. And when I post on social media, it's in a 20 to 30-second bit. Okay, TikTok likes you to post a video that's at least a minute, but I find those are less well watched than 20 to 30 seconds. The general public has about a 20 to 30-second appetite for cows, and then they're scrolling on, okay? So I enjoy doing that, but there's only so much I can say. I feel like I'm barely scratching the surface, and I have so many things I want to say. So when I started getting asked to speak, I just loved it. I was so excited because I could say more things and explain things on a deeper level. My favorite speaking event I've done was for a nutrition conference. So it was a group of nutritionists, human medical doctors, nurses, people that support the human health. Okay. And they were learning.
Not cow nutritionists.
Not cow nutritionists. Okay. No, human nutritionists. And they brought me in to speak about how it's important to understand the sourcing of your food, and then also advise their patients to make informed decisions, right? Because somebody that comes to their dietitian and says, I'll only eat organic because I want to make sure it has no antibiotics in it. We want that human dietitian to be able to say, well, let me tell you, none of the products have antibiotics in them. So if that's the reason you're doing it, that's not a good reason. And go into some of these things so that they can make good decisions for them. And that conference was so much fun. Those nutritionists, dietitians, they had the best questions. I was telling this story actually about antibiotics. I was talking about how I gave this cow a C-section. She needed a C-section, and it was in the field, and I was going to go on to talk about how then she received antibiotics because she just had this large surgery and that helped her. And anyway, so I'm telling this story and I say, and because I was able to do that procedure, I saved that cow's life. And I started to keep talking because that wasn't the point of my story, but the whole room burst into applause. They were so invested in how that cow was doing. And it was really, really cool because they were just really interested in what happens on farms and how are they housed and how do we take care of them and what are the cows eating and what kind of vet care did they get? And they had the best questions, and it was just a ball. I loved it. So I really enjoy speaking. I think it allows me to get a little deeper into some topics that I think are they're quite controversial and quite deep topics. So 20 to 30 seconds usually doesn't do it. It's a good intro, but getting deeper into those topics is really, really fun.
Right. Oh, that's awesome. Now, how do you maintain credibility with both audiences of the dairy farmers that you work with and the consumers, or like in that case, the dietitians that are your audience?
I think I have some help because I'm a veterinarian. So that automatically gives me some credibility with the general public, which I think is important. And I've spoken at veterinary conferences as well and talked to veterinarians about how I think it's important that we not take this for granted. We have a responsibility, yes, to the animals, but also to the public to share what we know and educate them in many different ways. And so that helps me with the general consumer. And the farmers, they mostly know the stuff that I'm talking about online. They're like, yeah, I knew that. Occasionally they'll say, oh, wow, I actually learned something but I think farmers, people don't give them enough credit. They're very knowledgeable. I mean, they know a lot about animal health, and they know a lot about cow comfort and genetics and common procedures that we do. I mean, the farmers are really, really smart people, and I work with a lot of great farmers. So mostly for them, they're just really excited that I'm helping them tell their story because they're busy and they don't want to, many of them don't want to take the time to do this, or it feels very overwhelming, or they don't want to put themselves out there. And so that I maintain credibility mostly because they're appreciative that I'm helping support the industry and get the truth out there.
Now, if you could give those guys or gals in the industry one piece of advice on communication, what would that be?
I think that people need to understand, the general public needs to understand that there are real people behind these farms. And it doesn't have to be you and your specific story and talking about your whole family and all of these things if you don't want it to be. But helping people see that there's somebody who cares behind the farm is important. I think we in agriculture, and dairy is an example, but I think this happens in other aspects of agriculture. We get very excited and proud of what we're doing, and we start talking about how one cow can make 100 pounds of milk in a day, and we have 10,000 cows on this farm, and we're, these big scale things that sound very exciting and impressive to the people within the industry because they know you've been working for this for a long time, and they know that a cow making 100 pounds of milk means she's really well cared for and she's getting good food and she's comfortable. And we understand all that. The general public doesn't understand all that. And those big numbers sound really scary. And they don't have to be scary, but when they're given out of context, they can sound scary. So I think that we need to humanize ourselves a little bit and not just be this faceless industry. And then the other thing I really tell everybody every time I speak is we need to be respectful. We need to be more respectful. I brought up the your thing because I see that all the time. People will clap back at somebody who said something to them and correct their spelling or something. And that's not really advancing your cause. It may make you feel better, but it's not helping the other person learn, and it's not helping the other people that are watching your response. And I have had many, many people comment on my videos and say, wow, you were a lot more respectful than I would have been to that person, because I do a lot of response. People will ask a question and I'll respond. And countless times people are like, that was a very diplomatic answer. That was really well thought out. And you explained that in such a nice, succinct way without being accusatory, because we don't know who's behind the keyboard, right? When people are commenting on things online, they have this bravery that they would not have if they were face to face with you. But we should not respond back with disrespect, because that may be an 11-year-old kid who's just parroting what he read online yesterday. That might be somebody's mom who bought some bad milk in the store yesterday, or left her milk out and it's spoiled or whatever, and she's like genuinely scared to buy milk in the future. That may be somebody whose kid has an immune disorder, and they heard a scary story online and they don't want that to happen to their kid, and they don't want to give their kid milk full of antibiotics. And usually what they're saying, we can agree on. Somebody tries to tell me, I don't want to give milk with antibiotics to my kid, and I don't jump in defense. I say, yeah, me neither. I don't want to give milk with antibiotics to my kids either. We are on the same page here. And then I can help them understand the checks and balances that milk goes through and how highly regulated of a product it is. So those would be my biggest pieces of advice: is be human and be real, but then also be respectful.
Well, Michelle, I really appreciate all the aspects of the conversation that we had today, jumping all over the place, but you're a wealth of knowledge. Really appreciate what you do for the industry, and appreciate you being on the podcast today. Where can people find out more about what you do and your channels?
People can look up DairyKind at www.dairykind.com if they are interested in learning more about our educational platform for dairy farm workers. And then they can check me out on the different socials and all of them at Dairy Doc. If you just search Dairy Doc, there's some version of that on pretty much every platform. And my website is michelleschack.com, or you can find me on LinkedIn if you're interested in me speaking or consulting with your company. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much, Michelle.
Thanks so much.
Well, thank you once again for listening to this episode of the Ag Culture Podcast with Michelle Schack. I just really enjoyed the conversation that we had together today, and always enjoy hearing about another person that's known for communicating in agriculture. Michelle is a wealth of knowledge and very good at communicating with consumers and retailers about what we do in the dairy industry and in agriculture in general. So with that, I would like to make a special request, as I usually do. Please share this episode with somebody that you know, to allow us to continue to grow our audience. If you thought we've done a good job, you can say thank you by sharing this with somebody else that you think would get value out of it. One more thing, I just want to say thank you to National Milk Producers Federation. I just got back from the conference, their annual meeting, where I was recognized as the Dairy Farmer Communicator of the Year with an award there. And I bring that up not to inflate myself, but I just want to say thank you to the people, all the guests that have been on this podcast over the last year or 2 years now, and my assistant, Julia, who helps put this together every week, as well as editing team. And there's a lot of people that are working behind the scenes to help bring out some of the social media posts that we do, the engagement that we have, and make this podcast possible. So I just wanted to say thank you to them and make sure everyone knew that this is not just Paul Windemuller sitting here. It's a team of people that are working together to produce content that is hopefully valuable to you. So with that, I just want to say thank you once again, and we will see you next week for another exciting episode of the Ag Culture Podcast.